So originally I was gonna do 10, and then I just realized I forgot a bunch, so this list may be a little bit longer on things you can eat that are native. So whether you like growing native or you like growing food, we are at the intersection. The literally potentially most perfect plants you could grow here in Florida, native edible. Hello and welcome back to Vlogmas, where I am answering tons of questions between Thanksgiving and Christmas as a special gift from me to you. And instead of just writing a couple sentences in the comment section, I'm doing whole videos. And today we're answering Oni Mandisa's question. She said, I bought some native blueberries last year, which has me thinking about native edibles. Do you know of any interesting native edible plants? Thank you for such a great video. I'm definitely looking for non-edible natives as well. I love seeing the flying, fluttering, and buzzing in my yard. Well, thank you so much, Oni. We've done a bunch of videos where we've hit on best edible plants for Florida, beautiful blossoming plants. We've talked about plants that attract and whether you should go exotic or not. We've done a lot of questions. So what I'm gonna really focus on in this question is really, let's talk native and edible. Is it possible to actually have the best of both worlds? Help the wildlife, don't damage the ecosystem, and also get food? Yes, it is true. You could be growing a native edible plant. And today I'm gonna go through a bunch of them, but here's the thing. I'm also gonna hit on a couple non-native edibles because there's often some confusion about a couple vegetables out there that people think are native, but they're not. That doesn't mean they're bad. It's just they're technically not native. So let's get into the list. So going down the list, I'm just like, oh, there's so many choices, where to start? But I thought about it and I was like, you know what, where a lot of Floridians are interested is in growing mulberries. And here in Florida, we actually do have a native mulberry, which you can get. And if you don't know mulberries, they're kind of like blackberry raspberries. That's kind of the best way I can describe it, but they're on a large shrub. So instead of having to deal with a lot of pest activity down at the ground level, you get to go up and pick them. And I personally have never grown the native mulberry, but I've heard from lots of people it's pretty comparable to the everbearing mulberry that I have. So if you're interested in going strictly native and you would like to get a mulberry, get the native mulberry to Florida. And actually, right behind you is another type of berry that you may want to consider, which is scrub blueberry. They taste super similar to blueberries. I feel like they're slightly salty. I don't know how to explain it, but it just feels like there's just this little slightly salty element to them. But one of the big differences is they stay really compact. They only get like, kind of think like beach ball size. And the berries are really small, but I think that's really beneficial for us in Florida because one of the upcoming videos we're gonna be talking about pests and wildlife and what you do about it. And when you have small harvests like tiny blueberries, you can pick them more often and have a better chance of getting your harvest before wildlife does. So consider adding something like a scrub blueberry. And what I also like about scrub blueberry is because of the shape of it, you can use it kind of like a standard small shrub in your garden, and most people wouldn't realize it's an edible plant. So it's one of those, if you have an HOA, you might be able to sneak it in because the leaf shape and some of the texture that it has is more similar to a box hedge and wouldn't be as noticeable. So something to think about. And I feel like when people get into native edible plants, one of the most popular ones for people to start with for a huge portion of our state is Beautyberry. Beautyberry is an awesome native edible to get into. One, it is super important for our migratory birds because it is putting out berries both in the spring and in the fall migration. So as all these birds are having to go travel really long distances, this is a key plant for them to go and like stock up their little bellies before they go the distance. One. Two, unlike many edible plants, it is one that actually does well in semi-shade to like kind of like a medium to medium heavy shade. These are really commonly found below oaks. So all of you guys who have like huge southern live oaks and you're like, I don't know what to put below them, Beautyberry. And item 3, is it 3, 4? I don't know what point I'm on for Beautyberry, but the other thing is the leaves can be used kind of like medicinally because the mosquitoes aren't big fans of it. So out in the wild, deers will go and sleep in Beautyberry bushes so that like the mosquitoes stay away, which we all know in Florida, like we're not big fans. So instead of growing some of the other exotic plants that we sometimes do to keep mosquitoes away, Beautyberry can be a really great option. And we haven't even got to the fact that it's edible. Now, I will tell you, and having talked to many other people who have this, eating the Beautyberry itself is like, is all right. It's not something I'm gonna be like, ooh, let me run over and pick. But Beautyberry jam, Beautyberry jelly, yeah, something worth happening. A definite Florida classic. So if you have semi-shade areas that you can't put classic vegetable crops or even native edibles in, consider using Beautyberry as one of those places. Oh, and another berry you can consider adding to your garden is elderberry. Yeah, you know how you can go to the grocery store and buy like elderberry, like vitamins, so that you can keep off colds, and it's like a really good source of vitamin C. Well, elderberry is actually native to Florida also. That's cool, right? I don't have any in my yard, but it's definitely something that if you kind of want some of a larger plant, maybe for the perimeter of your property, you could add elderberry and start making some elderberry teas, elderberry jams, elderberry. There's lots of elderberry stuff out there, but you'll figure it out. But you can grow it here. It's native. But what about fruits that might be a little bit bigger, right? Because when we're talking berries, we're talking like teensy tiny edible things. How does one fill up our stomach on that? But there are some actually bigger fruits that are native to here, and one of those is plums. Yes, plums. Not all types of plum are native to Florida, and actually the ones that grow here in Florida typically grow in North Florida. Where I live in St. Pete, we just don't get the chill hours to make these native plums work. And there are two types of native plums, Chickasaw plum and Flatwood plum. I cannot remember. One of them puts out like a lot of little shoot things. So like if you put it in, buyer beware that you're gonna get a lot of them like coming up and around. I just don't remember which one it is. It might be the Flatwood, it might be the Chickasaw. It's one or the other. But you could have plums, which I think is really cool, because I think a lot of times in Florida, like we just feel like we have to pull in exotic plants, but we have things like plums that are native. Now you may be thinking, but I don't live in North Florida, Jacqueline. I can't do Chickasaw. I can't do the Flatwood plum. What could I do? Well, down in the South, cocoa plums. Cocoa plums are native to Florida and often are used as kind of just like shrub lines in a lot of locations. That's right. You'll actually see the plums. Now, some taste better than others. And I know there are people out there trying to figure out how to get kind of that ideal tasting. I've heard the ones that taste good taste really good, and the ones that don't taste so good, but similar to some of our berries that are less desirable, even if you get one that doesn't taste quite so good, you could be making berries, jams, compotes, and things like that. Add a little bit of sugar and you should be okay. But maybe you don't want to grow plums, you want to grow grapes. And there are two different types of grapes that we can grow here in Florida. Now, these are not the ones that you get in the grocery store by a long shot. One is definitely something that a lot of people see as a weed. And the other one, well, you probably see it I see it on the highways all the time. So the one that you find along the highways and along sea lines is sea grape. And yes, they are edible. You can go and harvest them. I hear that they taste very good. And you could use them to border property areas. They do get rather big, so you need space for these. I don't know if you want to call them shrubby type plants, because they're not. And this is really great for people who live on the coastal areas where salt might be really challenging for growing edible food. Sea grapes would be an option for you. But maybe you're thinking a little bit more like a classic grape, and Muscadine grapes actually are native to Florida also. You could actually see Muscadine grapevines all over the place, especially Central and North Florida. They grow like weeds all over the place, but oftentimes they don't actually have any fruit on it, so most people don't realize those are Muscadine grapes. And a lot of the wineries in Florida have at least a version of Muscadine grape wine that they are doing. So they're not exactly like, they tend to have a thicker skin because, you know, it's Florida and we have a lot of insects. So Muscadine grapes, check your backyard. You may have some there already. Now, before I move on and continue my really extensive list of edible plants, I do want to hit on two plants that we talk about a lot and a lot of people think are native, but they actually aren't. So first, let's talk about Everglades tomatoes. A lot of people think this is native to Florida, and I understand where the misunderstanding comes from, because Everglades tomatoes were developed by the University of Florida. So a lot of people will say they're from University of Florida or they're from Florida, meaning they were cultivated there. But they are not, like, if we go back hundreds of years, Everglades tomatoes did not exist in Florida. They are a crop that was designed to grow in Florida. So they grow really, really well here, but they are not native. The other one that a lot of people think grow here, and it might have historically, but there's not sufficient evidence that it has, is Seminole pumpkins. And again, a lot of the confusion comes from the name Seminole, because the Seminole tribe has historically grown it. But for those who may not know the history lessons, is the Seminole tribe actually was not a native indigenous tribe of Florida. They got pushed down here in the 1800s during kind of like that Trail of Tears and Andrew Jackson time period. They weren't one of our actual tribes. So while they may have historically grown it in like the Alabama, Georgia area, we don't have necessarily any evidence that prior to 1500 that it was grown here in Florida. If it did, it was only on the most northern portions of our state. It was not all throughout our state. Actually checked this with the Florida Native Plant Society. I was talking to Val and I said, is it? And she's like, there's just really not any evidence. But new evidence comes out every day. I mean, it was only a couple of years ago where we found out that this edible plant was native to Florida. And what is that plant? Well, it's papaya. For a long time, we've thought this is an exotic plant of Florida, but as our researchers who are looking into the archaeological dig sites, well, they were doing some digging down in Lee County and they found papaya seeds. Now, this does not mean all papayas are native to Florida. It means there is one specific type. These seeds that they found in their archaeological dig site actually dated back to somewhere between 300 and 500 AD. So it has been here for a very long time. And for anyone who's grown papaya or had papaya accidentally pop up in your yard, the birds are really good at spreading it around. So if you're considering getting papaya, the ones that you're gonna find in the store are probably not our native type, and we're really not sure what that type is, but we can look to the future where papaya we might be able to find the variety that was native to here. And even if you were able to get your hands on that native papaya, it would really only grow well in your zone 10s, your 9Bs, and then of course, Southern Florida. But if you live in central North Florida and you kind of want something a little tropical, but it needs to be able to handle the cold, think Pawpaw. Described as kind of like a banana-like texture. It's custardy, it's creamy, but it likes the cold. It's actually what helped Lewis and Clark actually survive as they went through the Louisiana Purchase. Pawpaw is an awesome, awesome plant. I want to be able to grow it here because it's also the host plant of the zebra. Wait, how's this go? The zebra swallowtail? The zebra wing swallowtail. It says zebra, has swallowtail. It's cute, I want it, but I'm just not sure if that plant will grow for me. But if you're in the north central Florida and northern Florida, this would be a great choice. Its native range goes all the way up into Illinois, so it can handle the cold. So if you've been sitting here thinking about bananas, maybe instead consider doing pawpaws. So then I was searching my notes to figure out if there was anything kind of big fruit, vegetable things that we might be able to grow here that I've forgotten, and I had totally forgotten one, and that is we have our own native persimmon. While Japanese persimmons are really the most common ones that you're gonna find here in Florida, we actually have our own persimmon. And I remember Lily from the Florida Native Plant Society, she was doing a talk and she was like, a lot of people are sleeping on this plant. It tastes really, really good. So while I have never tried it, those who have are saying of like our native edible plants, this is one of those ones that if you've got the space for this tree, go for it. And in my double checking, I went and just did a quick search just to see if I was forgetting anything else beyond my notes. And I didn't know this one. So I'm really glad I looked in it. Apparently pecans, pecan, how do you say it? But apparently pecans are native to Florida. What? Now I don't know that these will grow in Central and South Florida, but for my North Floridians, hello, pecan pie, pecans. I like eating pecans. Now, some of you who pay attention on the channel, you may be saying, Jacqueline, but didn't you say like peppers are native to the Caribbean area? Are there any native peppers to Florida? And yes, there is. The bird pepper, which is very spicy. From those who have eaten it and talked to me about it, it is like hot, hot. So if you're in that kind of like Tabasco pepper, really spicy, they are tiny. If you've ever seen a Tabasco pepper, they look very, very similar and they can grow rather large. I actually have a neighbor who has one and they can get like a decent size. And this isn't a pepper like what you deal with in your vegetable garden where you have to plant it every year. You're gonna plant this one and it's gonna produce for years and years. So if you really are looking to like spice up some curries, spice up your black beans, like get yourself some bird pepper. And kind of in line with those pawpaws, that kind of are doing a double duty for our wildlife, which is they are a host plant for a butterfly, plus they're edible. Not quite as like big, but I know Gidget was I think Gidget, you were talking about this, is that this is all through like the Appalachia. This is huge, and that's Maypop passion vine. And of course, the Maypop passion fruit are edible and historically been eaten by lots of people for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years. And what's really cool about it is butterflies love it. And you got, actually, it's a host plant to 5 different butterflies. 3 are the most common, which is your zebra longwing, your Gulf fritillaries, and I always forget the third one. Julian something? Crimson something? I don't know. I don't get those ones in my yard. I get the other 2. The big challenge with this one is if you don't have enough of it, the butterflies, like, not the butterflies, the caterpillars, they just eat it all up. So you may not be able to get passion fruit very easily, but plant enough of it and let it get really established over time, you will get passion fruit. I think it took about a year and a half for me to get my first passion fruit, but I didn't know what I was doing, so I didn't harvest it. So I can't tell you how it tastes. So this one, a classic of Florida. Nothing says Florida like our state tree, but our state tree is not a tree. It is a grass. Well, technically it's a palm. And that is Cabbage Palm. Yes. Have you ever had cabbage from Cabbage Palm? Super good. Now, a bit challenging to grow and eat in your yard because you kind of got to grow one, chop it down, open up the whole inside, and it's a lot of work. And I'm not an expert on it, but it is edible and it's really tasty. For those who have ever had it, super yummy, super yummy. But cabbage palm, that would be an option too. Okay, so now we're gonna go off the beaten path of kind of like the typical things, but maybe you need a little bit of caffeine. And you might be thinking I'm gonna say wild coffee, but wild coffee has no caffeine in it, so not a good option for you from native plants. But Yaupon Holly does have caffeine, and Yaupon Holly is a really good hedge line. And if you're like into box hedges, like you can get like miniature Yaupon Holly box hedge type plants. They look really, really similar. So honestly, if you're pulling in exotic box hedges, just like swap them out for Yaupon Hollies and then get some caffeine. Maybe don't get too much caffeine. You'll be like all wired up and running around telling everybody, eat native plants, ah! But a lot of these were fruits and not necessarily gonna fill your tummy. You need something with some starch. You need something with like kind of tuberish, potato-ish, and that's gonna be Florida Betony. This one, from those who grow it, have said put it in some sort of enclosure because its tuber system will cause it to run wild. So you don't want to just put it like in a vegetable garden bed like this. Like you're gonna want to do like a raised bed where it can't get out, because if it does, you're gonna be pulling it forever, which on the one hand, that's great because you will have lots of food. But I do know people who've said they've planted with other wild natives and it's overtaken the bed. They also have really pretty flowers that pollinators like. They look weird. That's what I will say. They look weird, but apparently taste very good. And if you need a little something for your salad, go ahead and throw some spiderwort in. Things that you can add salads are things like spiderwort. You can also do Biden's Alba. People add into salads. What other ones are salad alternatives? I'm looking around, seeing which other ones you could just like pull leaves off of. I think those are the two main that I always remember. Yeah, we'll just go with those two for right now. And then for, oh my gosh, I forgot another one. And then for seasoning things, go ahead and do your sweet goldenrod. And then of course our dotted horsemint. Those are two, like if you need, looking for spices, seasoning, herbs, that's the word I'm looking for. Those would also be native and bring in pollinators like crazy. So it's win-win plant for you. So I just hit a lot of native edible plants. And so I hope this inspired you to consider how can you bring in one of these plants into your yard where you can hit the intersection of a win and a win of both it being native to our ecosystem's environment and it can feed you. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you have a question that you'd like me to answer, go ahead and put it in the comments below and I'll see you soon. Bye.